So before we actually take notes over this part, I actually want to go back and remind you of how you did long division back in elementary school. If you had something like 8,453 and you were dividing that by 7, you said 7 goes into 8 once, and then 1 times 7 is 7. And then you subtracted to say, okay, it would leave 1 left over. You'd bring down the next number, which is a 4. 7 goes into 14 twice. 2 times 7 is 14. Now when I subtract, I get 0. I bring down the 5. 7 doesn't go into 5, so 0. Then I bring down the 3. 7 goes into 53 7 times. 7 times 7 is 49. I would subtract and I'd have 4 left over. So it would be a remainder of 4 sevenths. So 1,207 and 4 sevenths would have been my answer. We're doing the same sort of things with polynomials. So I'm going to divide 8b squared plus 7b minus 17 by b plus 2. In order to multiply something by b to get 8b squared, I would have to multiply it by 8b. Now 8b times b plus 2 is 8b squared plus 16b. When I subtract that, 8b squared minus 8b squared is 0. 7b minus 16b is a negative 9b. And then I'm going to bring down my minus 17. I would have to multiply b by a negative 9 to get a negative 9b. So negative 9 times b plus 2 is negative 9b minus 18. Again, I subtract that from what's above it. This is 0. If it's not, we did something wrong. Negative 17 minus a negative 18 is positive 1. I'm out of b's, so my final answer is 8b minus 9 plus, because it's positive 1 over b plus 2. And then the final thing, and yes, you do have to write this on every problem, is the divisor, b plus 2, a factor of the dividend, 8b squared plus 7b minus 17. b plus 2 is not, and yes, you have to write this, a factor because, and I'm going to do the b/c for because, the remainder is not 0. So that's that. Remainder theorem is not 0. If the remainder was 0, then the binomial would be a factor of the thing, of the trinomial in this case. So 18n cubed plus 69n squared plus 59n plus 8, and yes, you need to rewrite this, divided by 3n plus 8. Don't try to skimp on your work. So 3n would have to be multiplied by a 6n squared to get 18n cubed. So 6n squared times 3n is 18n cubed. 6n squared times a positive 8 is going to make this plus 48n squared. I'm going to subtract this. Again, this should be 0, or I did something wrong. And then 69 minus 48, that's going to make this a 21n squared. Bring down my next term, my plus 59n. 3n would have to be multiplied by a positive 7n to get 21n squared. And then 8 times 7n is 56n. I'm going to subtract that. That's going to leave a positive 3n and bring down my plus 8. Hey, you know what? 3n plus 8 times 1 would be 3n plus 8. So when I subtract that, I get 0, which means 3n plus 8 is a factor. And why? Because the remainder is 0. And my answer is 6n squared plus 7n plus 1. So That's the first part of my answer. The second part of my answer is this. Yes, both of those parts are required on your worksheet and on your test. Now, notice here, this goes from a v to the fourth to a v cubed. It's missing a v squared. This is not going to be as important in ones like this, but when you're dividing by a trinomial, or you have missing terms here, it really is in your best interest to get in the habit of doing this. So, 10v to the fourth plus 5v cubed. I'm going to write a plus 0v squared in there to hold that space. Plus 30v plus 6. We're doing fairly basic division ones now, and so you're not going to run into where having that space not filled is a big issue, but it can be in the future. Like if this was a 10v squared plus 5 instead of a 10v plus 5 and we had a missing term here too, it could really wreak havoc if we don't keep that space in there. So I would have to multiply a 10v by a v cubed to get 10v to the fourth. So 10v to the fourth plus 5v cubed, when I multiply this by v cubed. When I subtract this whole part just becomes 0. I bring down my 0v squared, it's not going to help me, so I bring down my next term, plus 30v. I can kind of ignore this, but again, I have it there just to remind myself in other times I would need it. 10v would have to be multiplied by a positive 3 to get 30v. I'm going to go on bring down my next term because I'm going to need this binomial to work with this binomial. So I have a 30v, and then 3 times 5 is 15. Now when I subtract, 6 minus 15 is negative 9. So my answer is v cubed plus 3 minus 9 over 10v plus 5. That's part 1 of my answer. The second part of my answer is that 10v plus 5 is not a factor. Yes, you do have to write this because the remainder, don't be lazy on your answers, is not 0. Okay, so that's long division with polynomials.